Elena pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway, the wheels squeaking softly against the marble floor. It was just past 7 in the evening, and most people had already gone home. She preferred it this way. The quieter, the better. She'd been working at Heartfelt Enterprises for 3 years now, cleaning the fancy offices on the executive floors. 3 years of wiping down desks, emptying trash cans, and mopping floors that cost more per square foot than her entire monthly rent. 3 years of being invisible. That's what she was to most people here. Invisible. They'd walk right past her, in the hallways, talking on their phones or chatting with coworkers, never once looking her way. She was just part of the background, like the expensive paintings on the walls or the potted plants by the elevators. Elena was 32 years old, though the hard years had added a few more lines to her face than there should have been. She kept her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, nothing fancy. Her uniform was always clean and pressed, even if it was 2 sizes too big. She'd bought it secondhand, just like most things in her life these days. The other cleaning staff sometimes asked her to join them for lunch, but she usually declined. Not because she didn't like them, but because she preferred eating alone in the storage room on the 3rd floor. It was quiet there. Safe. A place where she could think about things without anyone bothering her. What nobody at this company knew, what nobody even suspected, was that Elena had once been someone completely different. Years ago, she'd been a student at Thornfield Conservatory, one of the best music schools in the country. She'd gotten in on a full scholarship, beating out hundreds of other talented kids for that spot. Piano. That was her life back then. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning to practice before classes. She'd skip meals because she was so focused on getting a difficult piece just right. Her professors said she had something special, that rare combination of technical skill and emotional depth that couldn't be taught. Elena had dreams back then, big ones. She was going to perform at Carnegie Hall. She was going to tour Europe. She was going to make a name for herself in the classical music world. Her teachers believed in her. She believed in herself. But then her mother got sick. Really sick. Cancer, the doctors said. Stage 4. Elena was in her final year at the conservatory when she got the call. She remembered sitting in the practice room, her fingers frozen on the keys, as her aunt's voice came through the phone explaining everything. She'd left school the next week, packed up her tiny dorm room, said goodbye to her dreams, and moved back home to take care of her mother. Someone had to do it, and there was no one else. Her father had died when she was young, and her aunt was too old to handle it alone. The next 6 years were a blur of hospital visits, medical bills, and night shifts at whatever job would hire her. She worked as a waitress, a store clerk, a receptionist, anything to pay the bills that kept piling up. Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Never enough. Her mother passed away 8 months ago. Peacefully in her sleep, which was the only mercy in the whole terrible situation. Elena had held her hand until the very end. After the funeral, after the last of the medical bills were sorted out, Elena found herself alone in a tiny apartment with nothing but memories and debt. That's when she took the job at Heartfelt Enterprises. The pay was decent, and the night shift meant she didn't have to interact with too many people. She could just do her work, collect her paycheck, and try not to think about the life she used to have. But working here came with its own special kind of torture, especially the marketing department on the 7th floor. Jessica was the worst of them. She was one of those women who seemed to have everything. Designer clothes, perfect hair, expensive jewelry. She was loud and confident, always surrounded by a group of followers who laughed at everything she said, and what she said about Elena was never kind. "Does she even speak English?" Jessica had said one day, loud enough for Elena to hear as she mopped the floor near their desks. Her friends had laughed even though Elena's English was perfectly fine. She'd been born in this country, had gone to school here her whole life. But she had a slight accent from her mother, and that was apparently hilarious to them. Another time, Jessica had deliberately knocked over her coffee cup, sending the liquid spilling across the floor Elena had just finished cleaning. "Oops," she'd said, smirking. "Guess you'll have to do it again." Elena had just gotten down on her knees and cleaned it up without a word. What else could she do? She needed this job. The bills didn't stop coming just because people were cruel. There were other small torments, too. Trash left on the floor right next to the bin. Desks deliberately messed up right before she came to clean. Whispered comments as she walked by. Sometimes they'd take photos of her when she wasn't looking, and she'd hear them giggling at their phones. She endured it all in silence. Every mocking laugh, every rude comment, every deliberate mess. She'd learned a long time ago that fighting back only made things worse. Better to keep your head down, do your work, and get through the day. But late. At night, when the building was empty and she was alone with her thoughts, Elena would feel something burning in her chest. Anger, maybe. Or sadness, or both mixed together into something she didn't have a name for. The only thing that gave her any comfort was the piano in the lobby. It was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway grand piano polished to a mirror shine, sitting under a spotlight like a piece of art. The CEO's late wife had insisted on having it there, or so the story went. It was meant to make the building feel cultured and sophisticated, but nobody ever played it. There was a strict rule, enforced by security. The piano was for display only. Don't touch. Elena would walk past it every night during her shift. Sometimes she'd stop and just look at it, her fingers itching to touch the keys. She could almost hear the music it could make, could almost feel the smooth ivory under her hands. But she never dared. Breaking the rules meant losing her job, and she couldn't afford that. So she'd just look at it for a moment, then move on with her cart, pushing down the ache in her chest that never quite went away. 3 years of this. 3 years of being invisible, of being mocked, of walking past that piano every single night and pretending she didn't feel like she was dying a little bit inside. But everything was about to change. It started on a Wednesday night when it wouldn't stop raining. The company had hosted some big event that evening, and the executives had left the place a complete mess. Elena's supervisor asked her to stay late to get everything cleaned up before morning. She didn't mind. Overtime meant extra money, and she had nowhere else to be anyway. By the time she finished, it was past 2 in the morning. The building was completely empty except for the security guard, and he'd stepped outside for his rounds. The rain was hammering against the huge windows, creating a steady rhythm that seemed to echo through the empty lobby, and there under its spotlight sat the piano. Elena stood there with her mop in hand, staring at it. She was exhausted. Her back hurt. Her feet hurt. Her heart hurt. The piano seemed to glow in the dim light of the empty building. Just this once, she thought. Nobody's here. Nobody would ever know. Her hands were shaking as she walked toward it. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it over the rain. She looked around one more time, making sure she was completely alone. The security guard was still outside. The cameras were there, of course, but who actually watched footage of the lobby at 2 in the morning? She reached out slowly, like the piano might disappear if she moved too fast. Her fingers touched the fallboard, the wooden cover that protected the keys. It was cool and smooth under her hands. She lifted it carefully, quietly, even though there was no one to hear. And there they were, 88 black and white keys, perfectly aligned, waiting. The piano had been tuned recently. She could tell, just by looking at it. The way everything was positioned just right. Elena sat down on the bench. It had been 7 years since she'd sat at a real piano like this. 7 years since she'd felt this particular mixture of fear and excitement and longing all mixed together. Her hands were shaking as she placed them on the keys. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music that came out was Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. It was the piece she'd been preparing for her final recital at the conservatory, the performance that never happened because life got in the way. The first notes were tentative, careful, but then something inside her broke open. Her fingers remembered. They remembered every note, every chord, every delicate touch and powerful crescendo. It was like the music had been sleeping inside her all these years, just waiting for this moment. She played with her eyes closed, and suddenly she wasn't a maid in a corporate lobby anymore. She was 25 again, full of dreams and possibilities. She was the girl who'd won competitions, who'd made her professors cry with her performances, who'd believed she could conquer the world with nothing but a piano and determination. Tears started streaming down her face, but she didn't stop playing. She couldn't stop. The music poured out of her like water from a broken dam. All the pain of the last 7 years, all the grief and loss and humiliation and exhaustion, it all came out through her fingers and transformed into something beautiful. The lobby had amazing acoustics. The sound echoed off the marble floors and high ceilings, filling every corner of the vast space. It was the kind of sound she'd dreamed about creating in concert halls around the world. She was so lost in the music that she didn't hear the private elevator open on the top floor. She didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs. She had no idea that anyone was watching. Alexander Hartwell had forgotten an important file in his office. He had an early morning flight for a business meeting in another city, and he needed those documents. He'd driven back to the building, used his private elevator, and grabbed what he needed from his desk. He was heading back to the elevator when he heard it. Music, piano music, echoing through the building. For a moment he just stood there in confusion. It was after 2 a.m. The building was supposed to be empty except for security and cleaning staff. Who could possibly be playing the piano? He walked to the mezzanine railing and looked down into the lobby. What he saw made him freeze. A woman in a cleaning uniform sat at his late wife's piano, playing with a skill that took his breath away. He'd heard countless pianists over the years. His wife had been a patron of the arts before she passed, and they'd attended hundreds of concerts together. But this was different. This wasn't just technical perfection. This was raw emotion transformed into sound. Whoever this woman was, she was playing like her life depended on it, like the music was the only thing keeping her alive. Alexander stood there for the entire performance, not moving, barely breathing. When the final notes faded away, he found himself gripping the railing, his knuckles white. The woman sat still for a moment, her shoulders shaking. Then she seemed to come back to reality. She closed the piano quickly and stood up, reaching for her cleaning cart. Alexander made a decision. He walked down the main staircase, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The woman spun around when she heard him, and the look on her face was pure terror. She was in her 30s, he guessed, with dark hair pulled back in a bun. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "Who are you?" Alexander asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hartwell." The words tumbled out of her in a rush. "I shouldn't have touched it. Please don't fire me. I just missed it so much. I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." She knew who he was. Of course she did. Everyone in the building knew Alexander Hartwell, even if he'd never really looked at most of them. He held up his hand. "Stop, I'm not going to fire you." He studied her face, trying to place her. Had he ever seen her before? Probably. He walked through this lobby every day. But had he actually seen her? "You work on the cleaning staff?" She nodded, clutching her cart like it might protect her. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The question seemed to surprise her. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure if answering would get her in more trouble. "Thornfield Conservatory, sir. 7 years ago. I had to leave Thornfield." Alexander knew that name. It was one of the best music schools in the country. You didn't get into Thornfield unless you were exceptional. He pulled out his phone and typed her name into the search bar. She'd told him her name was Elena Torres. Within seconds, results started appearing. Elena Torres, winner of the Brennan competition at age 23. Videos of her performing at various venues. Articles about promising young talents in classical music. And then nothing. 7 years ago, she'd just disappeared from the music world. "You won the Brennan competition," he said, looking up from his phone. "There are videos of you performing. Critics called you one of the most promising pianists of your generation." He paused. What happened? Something flashed across her face. Anger, maybe, or pain, probably both. Her jaw tightened. "Life happened, Mr. Hartwell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish my shift." She started to push her cart toward the service elevator. "Wait," Alexander said. An idea was forming in his mind. A crazy idea, maybe. But he'd built his company on taking calculated risks. "I have a proposition for you." She stopped but didn't turn around. "In 3 weeks, we're hosting our annual charity gala. Right here in this lobby. 500 guests, all the city's elite. We usually hire a classical ensemble for entertainment." He paused. "I want you to perform instead." Now she did turn around, her eyes wide. "What?" A 20-minute set, whatever pieces you want to play. I'll pay you $10,000. He watched her face carefully. $10,000 was probably more than she made in several months of cleaning floors. He could see her mind working, calculating, wanting to say yes, but afraid to. I can't, she finally said. I haven't performed in years. I work night shifts. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. I can't. You have 3 weeks to prepare. I'll arrange for you to use the piano during your breaks. Practice as much as you need. As for clothes and everything else, we'll handle it. Alexander used his business voice, the one that closed deals and made things happen. Unless you're afraid. He knew he was manipulating her. The challenge was deliberate. But he needed her to say yes. He needed to hear her play again. Needed to understand why a talent like hers was wasted pushing a cleaning cart through his building. Elena lifted her chin, and for the first time, he saw the steel underneath her quiet exterior. I'm not afraid of anything, Mr. Hartwell. Her voice was steady now. I accept, Alexander smiled. Good. I'll have my assistant contact you tomorrow with the details. She nodded and pushed her cart toward the elevator. But before she got there, she stopped and looked back at him. Mr. Hartwell? Why are you doing this? He thought about his wife, about the piano she'd insisted on putting in the lobby. She'd always said that beauty shouldn't be hidden away, that everyone deserved a chance to shine. Because someone should hear you play, he said simply. After she left, Alexander stood in the lobby for a long time, thinking about talent and waste and second chances. Then he pulled out his phone and started making arrangements. This gala was going to be interesting. The next morning, Elena woke up wondering if she'd dreamed the whole thing. But then her phone buzzed with an email from Alexander Hartwell's assistant. It was real. All of it was real. The email laid out the details. She could use the lobby piano every day during her lunch break and for an hour after her shift ended. Security had been notified. A practice schedule was attached. The gala was exactly 21 days away. Elena stared at her phone for a long time. 21 days to prepare for the performance of her life. 21 days to prove she was more than just a woman pushing a cleaning cart. 21 days to show everyone who'd looked through her like she was invisible that they'd been wrong. She got to work that evening with a strange mixture of excitement and terror churning in her stomach. When her lunch break came, she went down to the lobby. The piano sat there waiting for her, and this time she didn't have to feel guilty about touching it. She sat down and started practicing. Her fingers were rusty at first, stumbling over passages that used to flow effortlessly, but slowly the muscle memory came back. The piano became an extension of herself again, the way it used to be. She was so focused on playing that she didn't notice the small crowd gathering on the mezzanine above. Office workers on their lunch breaks, curious about who was playing. They pulled out their phones, recording snippets of her practice session. By the end of the week, word had spread through the entire company. Someone was practicing piano in the lobby every day during lunch. The music was beautiful. Nobody knew who it was. That's when Jessica from marketing decided to investigate. She took the elevator down during her lunch break, her usual group of friends trailing behind her. They stood near the edge of the lobby watching. When they saw who was sitting at the piano, Jessica's mouth fell open. No way, she said loud enough for people nearby to hear. That's the cleaning lady. Her friends started giggling. One of them pulled out her phone and started recording. Jessica walked closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor, deliberately making noise to distract Elena. Elena's hands faltered on the keys. She looked up and saw them standing there, Jessica's face twisted in that familiar mocking expression. So this is who's been playing, Jessica said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How cute. The maid thinks she's a pianist. Her friends laughed right on cue like they'd been trained to do it. Elena felt her face burning. She wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat like always. Jessica pulled out her own phone. Everyone needs to see this. This is too good. She held up the phone, recording. Guys, you won't believe this. Our cleaning lady is going to perform at the company gala. Can you imagine? This is going to be the most embarrassing thing ever. She posted the video to the company's internal social network before Elena could even stand up from the piano bench. The caption read, Cinderella thinks she's going to the ball. Can't wait to see this disaster. 3 weeks until the biggest joke of the year. Within an hour, the post had hundreds of views. People Elena had never even spoken to started commenting. Some were curious. Some were supportive. But most were cruel. Someone left a toy piano on her cleaning cart the next day. Another person printed out a picture of a monkey playing piano and taped it to her locker. When she walked through the hallways, people would whisper and point. She heard the word delusional more than once. The marketing department was the worst. They'd walk past the lobby during her practice sessions just to laugh. They'd make comments loud enough for her to hear. My 5-year-old plays better than that. Does she really think people will sit through this? Someone should tell her the truth before she embarrasses herself. Elena wanted to quit. She wanted to call Alexander Hartwell and tell him she'd made a mistake. That she couldn't do this. But every time she thought about backing out, she'd remember that $10,000. She'd remember how it felt to play again after so many years. She'd remember the look on Alexander's face when he'd hurt her that night. So instead of quitting, she practiced harder. Every cruel comment, every mocking laugh, every humiliating moment became fuel. She channeled all of it into the music. Her anger, her pain, her determination to prove them all wrong. 2 weeks before the gala, Alexander's assistant called her up to his office. Elena had never been to the executive floor during the day. She felt out of place in her cleaning uniform, surrounded by people in expensive business clothes who stared at her as she walked by. Alexander's office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. The furniture probably cost more than Elena had made in the past year. He sat behind a massive desk looking at his computer screen with a frown. "Sit down," he said without looking up. Elena sat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk, feeling smaller than ever. Alexander turned his computer screen toward her. The company social network was pulled up, showing Jessica's post and all the comments underneath it. "I've seen what they're doing to you," he said, his voice tight with anger. "I can stop this right now. Fire Jessica and anyone else involved in this harassment." Elena's first instinct was to say yes. Let him fire them all. Let them feel even a fraction of the humiliation they'd put her through. But then she thought about it more carefully. "No," she said quietly. Alexander looked surprised. "No? Don't fire anyone." Elena sat up straighter in her chair. "Let them laugh. Let them think I'm going to fail. Let them record it and post it and make all the jokes they want." She met his eyes. "It'll make proving them wrong that much better." Something shifted in Alexander's expression. He studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You know, you remind me of someone," he said, his voice softer now. "My wife. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Elena said, and meant it. "She never let anyone dim her light," Alexander continued. "People told her she couldn't do things and she'd just smile and do them anyway. That piano in the lobby? That was her idea. Everyone thought it was impractical, that it would just collect dust. But she insisted." He paused. "She'd have liked you, I think." It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with her. Elena didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. "All right," Alexander said, straightening up and becoming businesslike again. "If you won't let me fire them, at least let me help you prepare properly." He picked up his phone and made a call. "I'm hiring a professional coach for you, someone who trains concert pianists, and we're getting you a proper dress for the gala. No arguments. Mr. Hartwell, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He was already typing something on his computer. "You're representing my company at this event. We're going to make sure you have everything you need to succeed." Over the next 2 weeks, Elena's life transformed in ways she never expected. The piano coach Alexander hired was a woman named Dorothy, who'd trained some of the most famous pianists in the world. She was tough, demanding, and didn't accept anything less than perfection. But she also believed in Elena in a way that reminded her of her old professors at the conservatory. A stylist came to Elena's tiny apartment with dresses for her to try on. They settled on an elegant black gown that made Elena feel like someone else entirely, someone confident, someone who belonged on a stage. Alexander started staying late at the office more often. He'd tell himself it was because he had work to do, but really, he'd find himself standing on the mezzanine listening to Elena practice. There was something about her determination that moved him. She'd lost everything and rebuilt herself from nothing. She was surviving in a world that tried to crush people like her every single day. He found himself thinking about her at odd moments, wondering about her story, wondering what other dreams she'd had to give up. wondering why someone with so much talent had ended up cleaning floors in his building. One evening, a week before the gala, he went down to the lobby after everyone else had gone home. Elena was there, practicing the same difficult passage over and over, trying to get it perfect. "You're ready," he said from behind her. She jumped, her hands crashing down on the keys in a discordant sound. "Mr. Hartwell, I didn't hear you come in." "You're ready," he repeated. "Stop doubting yourself." Elena turned on the bench to face him. "What if I mess up? What if they're right and I'm not good enough anymore?" Alexander walked closer. "Then you'll remember that you survived losing everything once before and built yourself back up. You're not playing for them. You're playing for that girl who had to give up her dream 7 years ago. Show her it wasn't all for nothing." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Nobody had believed in her like this in a very long time. One week, Alexander said, "In 1 week, you're going to walk onto that stage and remind everyone in this building who you really are." Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. 1 week, she repeated. She didn't know it yet, but that performance was going to change everything. The day of the gala arrived faster than Elena expected. She woke up that morning with her stomach in knots, unable to eat breakfast. Her hands were shaking as she made coffee. What had she been thinking agreeing to do this? The entire building was being transformed for the event. Elena watched from the upper floors as workers hung crystal chandeliers, set up tables with white tablecloths, and arranged flowers that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The Steinway grand piano sat center stage under a spotlight, waiting. Alexander had given her the day off to rest and prepare, but she couldn't stay in her apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in, so she went to the building early, using her key card to slip in through the employee entrance. She found a quiet corner in the storage room where she used to eat lunch alone. Sitting on an overturned bucket, she closed her eyes and tried to calm her breathing. In a few hours, 500 of the richest, most important people in the city would be watching her, judging her, and Jessica and her friends would be there too, waiting for her to fail. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy, her coach. "Remember, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself. Trust your training. You're ready." Another text came through. This one from Alexander. "Don't overthink it. Just play." Elena smiled despite her nerves. 2 weeks ago, these people didn't even know she existed. Now they were sending her encouraging messages before the biggest performance of her life. At 5 o'clock, the stylist arrived at the building with her dress and a makeup artist. They'd set up a small dressing room in one of the conference rooms. Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror when they were done. The black gown fit her perfectly, elegant but not showy. Her hair was swept up in a way that made her look sophisticated. The makeup was subtle but made her features stand out. "You look beautiful," the stylist said, standing back to admire her work. Elena stared at her reflection. She looked like the person she used to be, the girl who'd walked onto stages at the conservatory with her head held high, the girl who'd believed she could conquer the world. Downstairs, guests were starting to arrive. Elena could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, the soft background music playing through the speakers. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. At 6:30, there was a knock on the door. Alexander stepped in, wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He stopped when he saw her, and for a moment he just stared. "You look terrified," he finally said. Elena let out a shaky laugh. "I am terrified. What if I've forgotten everything? What if my hands freeze up? What if they laugh?" Alexander walked closer. "Do you want to know something? My wife used to get stage fright before every single charity event she hosted. Every single one. And she'd hosted hundreds of them." He smiled at the memory. "She told me once that being nervous meant you cared. That the day you stopped being nervous was the day you stopped trying to be great. What if I'm not great anymore?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Then you'll still be braver than 99% of the people in that room," Alexander said firmly. "You know what most of them have never done? Risked anything, failed at something, lost everything and had to start over. They've lived comfortable lives where everything came easy." He paused. "You've lived a real life. That's what makes you extraordinary." Elena felt tears threatening to ruin her makeup. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Don't thank me yet. You still have to go out there and show them what you're made of." But Alexander was smiling. "Come on, it's time." The walk from the conference room to the lobby felt like miles. Elena could hear her heels clicking on the floor, could feel the gown swishing around her legs. They stopped at the entrance to the lobby, hidden from view of the guests. The room looked like something out of a fairy tale. 500 people in designer gowns and expensive tuxedos mingled under sparkling chandeliers. Waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, and in the center of it all, the Steinway waited under its spotlight. Elena spotted Jessica and her friends near the front. They had their phones out already, ready to record what they expected to be a humiliating failure. Jessica was wearing a red dress that probably cost more than Elena's car, and she was laughing about something with her group. "Last chance to back out," Alexander said quietly. Elena took a deep breath. "No, I'm doing this." "That's what I thought." He squeezed her hand once quickly, then walked out into the crowd. Elena watched as he made his way to the small stage next to the piano. The jazz music faded. People turned to look at him, conversations dying down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander's voice carried across the room, "thank you all for joining us for Heartfelt Enterprises' annual charity gala. Tonight we're raising money for music education programs in underserved communities." He paused. "As you know, we usually have a classical ensemble perform for us, but this year I wanted to do something different." Elena could see Jessica whispering to her friends, grinning. "Tonight's performer is someone very special," Alexander continued. "She's a graduate of Thornfield Conservatory, one of the finest music schools in our country. She won the Brennan competition at age 23, beating out hundreds of talented musicians. Critics called her one of the most promising pianists of her generation." The crowd murmured with interest. Elena could see people looking around, trying to spot this impressive musician. "Life took her away from performing for several years," Alexander said. "But talent like hers doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right moment to shine again." "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elena Torres." The applause started as Elena stepped into view. But it faltered, got confused as people recognized her. The cleaning lady, the maid. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Elena could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could sense the shock and confusion and in some cases barely concealed amusement. Jessica's grin got wider. She held her phone up higher, making sure she captured every moment. Elena walked toward the piano, her legs shaking but her head held high. She could feel the weight of everyone's expectations, their doubts, their judgments. Part of her wanted to run, but a bigger part of her, the part that had survived everything life had thrown at her, kept moving forward. She sat down at the piano bench. The room went completely silent. 500 people holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Elena placed her hands on the keys. They were steady now. All the fear, all the doubt, all the nervousness had crystallized into something else. Focus, determination, purpose. She closed her eyes, took one last breath and began to play. The first notes of Rachmaninoff filled the lobby. But this wasn't the tentative playing of someone who hadn't performed in years. This was powerful, confident, filled with emotion that had been bottled up for too long. Elena poured everything into the music. 7 years of loss and grief and struggle. 7 years of being invisible, of being mocked, of having to hide who she really was. 7 years of walking past this piano every night and pretending it didn't break her heart. The lobby's acoustics transformed the sound into something magical. The notes soared up to the high ceilings and cascaded back down like water. Elena's fingers flew across the keys, muscle memory taking over, years of training flooding back. She moved from Rachmaninoff to Chopin, then to Debussy. Each piece told a different part of her story. The beautiful life she had lost, the hard years that followed, the hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for second chances. The room was absolutely silent except for the music. Elena opened her eyes briefly and saw people standing frozen, champagne glasses forgotten in their hands. Some were crying. She saw Alexander standing near the back, his expression unreadable, but his attention completely focused on her. And then she saw Jessica. The mocking grin was gone. Her phone hung loose in her hand, forgotten. She looked shocked, maybe even ashamed. Elena closed her eyes again and dove into the final piece. Not something classical this time, but an improvisation. She let her fingers find their own way, creating something new, something that captured this exact moment. The fear and triumph and liberation of finally being seen for who she really was. When the last note faded away, The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Elena sat with her hands still on the keys, her heart pounding, afraid to look up. And then the applause started. It began with one person, then another, then suddenly the entire room erupted. People weren't just clapping. They were standing, giving her a standing ovation. Some were shouting, "Bravo!" Others were wiping tears from their eyes. Elena stood up slowly, hardly able to believe what was happening. The applause kept going, wave after wave of it washing over her. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. And this was just the beginning. Elena stood on the stage, overwhelmed by the applause that seemed to go on forever. She'd dreamed of moments like this back at the conservatory, but she'd never imagined it would feel this powerful, this real. People were on their feet, some with tears streaming down their faces. A woman in a silver gown was clutching her husband's arm, both of them clapping enthusiastically. An older gentleman in the front row had his hand over his heart, nodding at her with respect. Through the crowd, Elena's eyes found Jessica. The woman who'd tormented her for months was still standing there, frozen. Her phone was in her hand, but she wasn't recording anymore. She just looked stunned, like the world had shifted under her feet and she couldn't quite find her balance. Alexander made his way through the crowd toward the stage. When he reached Elena, he was smiling in a way she'd never seen before. Not his professional CEO smile, but something genuine and warm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, and the applause gradually died down. "I think we can all agree that was extraordinary." More applause. He waited for it to quiet again. "But I have an announcement to make that I think you'll all appreciate." Elena looked at him confused. This wasn't part of the plan. "Tonight's performance reminded me of something important," Alexander continued. "My late wife always believed that talent shouldn't be wasted, that everyone deserves a chance to share their gifts with the world. She's the reason that piano is in this lobby. She believed in supporting artists, especially those who face obstacles." He turned to look at Elena, "which is why I'm pleased to announce the creation of the Elena Torres Music Scholarship Fund. This fund will support talented students who face financial hardship, giving them the chance to pursue their musical education without having to choose between their dreams and survival." The crowd applauded again. Elena felt her eyes filling with tears. "Furthermore," Alexander said, his voice carrying across the room, "I'm offering Ms. Torres the position of Director of Arts and Culture for the Heartfelt Foundation. She'll perform, teach, mentor young musicians, and help us build programs that nurture talent in our community." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. A position like that meant a real salary, benefits, the chance to do what she loved every single day, the chance to help other people who were struggling the way she had struggled. "Do you accept?" Alexander asked, speaking directly to her now. Through her tears, Elena nodded. Yes, I accept." The applause this time was deafening. People rushed forward to congratulate her, to shake her hand, to tell her how moved they were by her performance. Elena felt like she was floating, like none of this could possibly be real. But Alexander wasn't done. He raised his hand for silence one more time. His expression had turned serious now, almost stern. "I have one more thing to say, and this is important." The crowd quieted down, sensing the shift in his tone. "I've learned something troubling over the past few weeks," Alexander said. "I've learned that someone with extraordinary talent was working in this building, and most of us never saw her. We looked right through her because of her job title, because of her uniform. We made assumptions about who she was based on what she did to pay her bills." Elena could see some people in the crowd shifting uncomfortably. Alexander's words were hitting home. "What's worse," he continued, "some employees actively mocked and harassed Ms. Torres. They posted videos online making fun of her. They left insulting notes. They tried to humiliate someone who was simply trying to prepare for tonight." Jessica had gone pale. Her friends were staring at the floor. "Effective immediately," Alexander said, his voice cold now. "Any employee found bullying or harassing colleagues will face termination. I don't care what department you work in or how valuable you think you are. Hartwell Enterprises will not tolerate cruelty. Excellence isn't about putting others down. It's about lifting everyone up." The message was clear. Elena saw Jessica whisper something to her friends, then slip toward the exit. But before she could leave, Alexander called out, "Ms. Chen, please stay. I'd like to speak with you after the event." Jessica froze, her face burning red. People were staring at her now, putting the pieces together. She was the one who'd been bullying Elena, She was the one who'd posted those videos. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Elena. People kept coming up to her, introducing themselves, asking about her background. Several offered to hire her for private events. A woman from the symphony orchestra gave Elena her card, saying they'd love to have her perform with them. An older man who introduced himself as a retired music professor shook her hand warmly. "I saw you perform at the Brennan competition all those years ago," he said. "I've wondered what happened to you. I'm so glad you're back." Elena talked to so many people her voice started to get hoarse, but she didn't mind. For the first time in 7 years, people were seeing her, really seeing her. Around 10 o'clock, the crowd started to thin. Elena found a quiet corner to catch her breath. She was exhausted, but in the best possible way. Her feet hurt from the heels and her hands were tired from playing, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Alexander found her there. He'd loosened his tie and looked tired too, but satisfied. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," Elena corrected. "None of this would have happened without you. I just gave you the opportunity. You're the one who took it and ran with it." He paused. "That job offer, by the way, is real. I want you to start thinking about what programs you'd like to develop, who you want to help, what you want to build." Elena nodded, still trying to process everything. "Mr. Hartwell, why did you really do all this?" "It's more than just hearing me play that night." "What is it?" Alexander was quiet for a moment. "My wife died 3 years ago. After she passed, I threw myself into work. I stopped noticing things, stopped seeing people. I became the kind of person who walks past someone every day and never really looks at them." He met Elena's eyes. "You reminded me that there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings. You reminded me to actually see people." "She must have been an amazing person," Elena said softly. "She was." Alexander smiled sadly. "She would have loved tonight. She would have loved you." They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last guest filter out. The cleanup crew was already starting to work, breaking down tables, collecting glasses. Elena recognized some of them. People she'd worked alongside for 3 years. "I should go help them," she said automatically. "No," Alexander said firmly. "Those days are over. You're not part of the cleaning crew anymore. You're part of something bigger now." Elena looked at the piano, still gleaming under its spotlight. "I can't believe this is my life now." "Believe it. You earned it." Alexander checked his watch. "It's late. Let me have my driver take you home." As Elena gathered her things, she saw Jessica standing near the elevator, looking small and miserable. Their eyes met for just a moment. Jessica opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it and looked away. Elena thought about going over to her, about saying something. But what was there to say? Jessica had made her choices. Now she'd have to live with the consequences. 3 months later, Elena stood in front of a classroom at the Hartwell Foundation's new community music center. 15 students ages 8 to 18 sat at keyboards, ready for their first lesson. They came from the same kind of neighborhoods Elena had grown up in. Places where music lessons were a luxury families couldn't afford. "Music saved my life," Elena told them on that first day. "Not because it made me famous or rich, but because it gave me a voice when I thought I'd lost everything. It gave me hope when things were darkest, and now I get to share that with all of you." The students looked at her with the same hunger she'd had at their age, the same dreams she'd almost given up on. At the back of the classroom, Alexander stood watching. He'd attended the opening ceremony and stayed to see Elena teach her first class. He caught her eye and nodded, then quietly slipped out. Elena turned back to her students. "Okay," she said, smiling. "Let's begin." 6 months after the gala, Elena performed her first major concert as artist-in-residence at the Hartwell Foundation. The theater was packed. Her students sat in the front row along with Dorothy, her coach, and many of the people who'd attended that fateful gala. Alexander sat in the audience too, watching as Elena walked onto the stage in another elegant gown, this time dark blue. She looked different now, confident, free, like she'd finally stepped back into the life she was always meant to have. As she played, Alexander thought about his wife, about the piano in the lobby, about how one random night could change everything. He'd gone back to the office for a forgotten file and stumbled onto someone's secret pain and hidden talent. Now that person was thriving, and she was helping others thrive too. After the concert, Elena found him in the lobby. "Thank you for coming," she said. I wouldn't have missed it. Alexander paused. You know, I got a letter last week. From Jessica Chen. Elena tensed. Oh, she apologized. Said she'd been doing therapy, working on herself. She asked if there was any way she could volunteer at the music center. Help with administrative work or fundraising. He watched Elena's face. What do you think? Elena thought about it. About how easy it would be to say no to keep Jessica out of this new life she'd built. But then she thought about second chances, about how she'd been given one when she needed it most. Tell her yes, Elena said. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Alexander smiled. You really are extraordinary, you know that? Elena looked around at the theater, at the people gathering to congratulate her, at the life she'd rebuilt from nothing. No, she said. I'm just someone who refused to stay invisible. Turns out that's all it takes sometimes, and she was right. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to give up, one person who sees you when everyone else looks away, and one moment of courage to change everything.